Welcome to Illuminati Silver. We tell you the truth about silver. Today is Thursday, the 19th of December 2019. And earlier today we published a video entitled Bank of England Holds Rates, but Gold and Silver Rise. And yesterday we produced one entitled Gold and Silver May Now Be Cheap in Sterling Terms. And we've placed links to these in the description box below. We have mentioned previously that each week we receive a publication for finance industry officials and advisors called Financial Advisor, a Financial Times publication. Periodically, we read appropriate articles from these, and this week's edition, there are two very positive and interesting articles included. One written by Jeff Prestridge, the personal finance editor of the Mail on Sunday newspaper, and the other by James Coney, not to be misinterpreted as James Comey, but James Coney with an N, the money editor of the Times and Sunday Times newspapers. They're interesting because they give us all an indication of the fears that they had should Jeremy Corbyn have won the UK general election, and what this would have meant for investors' capital. They also highlight how the UK economy and investments in particular could face a new lease of life, providing, of course, Boris Johnson does not mess it all up. We shall read both articles back to back and then give a final comment. A Much Happier New Year by Jeff Prestridge, personal finance editor of the Mail on Sunday newspaper. Quote, "Well, knock me down with a personal finance feather. In my heart of hearts, I never thought we would be where we are today, going into the new year with Boris Johnson heading a Conservative government with an 80-seat majority, Labour in rebuild mode, and the Liberal Democrats leaderless and in proverbial pieces. Am I dreaming? Have I had too much of the mulled wine those kind people at Whole Foods Market keep plying me with every time I go in there to buy the odd tomato and packet of mushrooms? Help me, please. On election night, I truly thought we were heading for yet another minority government and yet more prevarication over Brexit. In fact, to put my mind off matters of importance and to relax me ahead of a journalistic slog the next day, writing about the election outcome, I decided to pop along to Bush House in London to listen to a reading of James Graham's election night play, The Vote. It was a barrel of laughs, helped by a stellar cast: Simon Russell Beale, Mark Gatiss and Catherine Tate. Just what I needed. Although The Vote was primarily about voting fraud and the cack-handed way polling officials attempt to cover it up, there is nothing fraudulent about the Conservative Party's emphatic victory at the polls. The people, especially those in the Midlands and the North, have spoken. They want Brexit done and a government in place that will invest in the economy and make the country a world powerhouse once again. So far, Mr. Johnson has said and done all the right things, acknowledging the role of the pragmatic working classes in his party's triumph, and travelling north to Tony Blair's old constituency of Sedgefield in County Durham to thank some of them. The Queen's speech will get Mr. Johnson's plans rolling down the alleyway, with spending commitments made to the National Health Service that are enshrined in law, and major investment in infrastructure projects based in the north. A budget in the new year, probably February, will flesh out any plans that impact on the personal finance world that we, you the reader and me the writer, make our living from. There is no doubt the Conservative government we now have will be kinder to those wishing to build personal wealth than a Jeremy Corbyn-led administration would ever have been. Although Labour's confused stance on Brexit was probably the main reason behind its downfall, its proposed assault on personal wealth reinforced the suspicion it was the party of envy rather than reward. Thankfully, we no longer have to worry about frightening tax rate hikes on capital gains and dividend income, together with cuts in annual tax-free allowances. That would have done serious damage to people's propensity to invest in the stock market. Nor do we have to worry about a more onerous inheritance tax regime. Of course, it would not all be milk and honey under Johnson. Although both the pound and the UK stock market responded positively to the return of a stronger government, there will be big hurdles ahead. Trade agreements to be reached, deadlines to be met, and international issues to upset apple carts. The government will also have to keep a keen eye on its ambitious spending plans so that it does not stoke up inflationary pressures and worry markets. Yet overall, the case for investing in the UK stock market is stronger than it has been for a long time, which is good news for investors, financial planners, and wealth managers. It might also be the perfect environment for some beaten-up fund managers, the likes of Mark Barnett at Invesco, to show their mettle and come to the fore once again. I do hope so. If there were one personal finance wish I could make this New Year's Eve, as I dance the night away in some swanky hotel in Berkshire, it is this: more simplicity, please. It is high time a government sorted out the messes that are pensions and inheritance tax. Both are overcomplicated and in desperate need of a brutal overhaul. The strong government we now have has the mandate to carry out such an overhaul. Please do, Mr. Johnson. I wish you a prosperous 2020. End of article. Will Election End Assault on Wealth by James Coney, money editor of The Times and the Sunday Times newspapers. And breathe. The pound climbed to an 18-month high. UK funds reported sharp inflows for the first time in months, and even business leaders began to sound more confident. The general election result that returned the Tories with a whopping majority was a triumph of working-class will, and another example of how Twitter and the voices of the liberal elite in London are so unrepresentative of what is happening in the real world. Leave or remain, the result is particularly crucial for economic confidence. Not so much get Brexit done as get business done. How many decisions must have been postponed because of the uncertainty of the past few years of slim majorities and coalitions? Financial planning has been practically impossible in the environment we had. It is unquantifiable how much money has been wasted setting up offshore structures for those worried about a Corbyn raid on wealth. Just imagine the floods of money leaving the country had that first exit poll not been so clear-cut. I always say that you should plan for the economics and not the politics. Long-term saving through thick and thin has always been the best strategy, but faced with such a hostile attitude to wealth from the left, it is hardly surprising that putting money under the mattress looked like such an attractive proposition for investors. Jeremy Corbyn seemed to hate property wealth, savings and investment. He demonised those who tried to do the right thing and take private steps to prepare for retirement. A majority gives Boris Johnson the chance to move to the centre, hopefully, but also with his Chancellor to even out the mess of our current tax and pension system. Only someone with a confident majority could do this. Let us pray for the end of the pensions taper for all workers, not just those in the National Health Service, but also we must be careful what we wish for. The Labour and Liberal Democrat manifestos both called for reform of taxation on dividends and capital gains. We may get a national insurance cut in the first budget, but this is a party that needs to raise money from somewhere in order to fund its spending plans. There was clearly traction in the notion that capital gains should be taxed as income. Let us not forget that it was actually Margaret Thatcher's Chancellor Nigel Lawson who did this before, and the fact that £50 billion or so that is given up in pensions tax relief every year must also look very tantalising. Only a majority of government would dare to cash in on this. What I hope above all is an end to uncertainty and, crucially, no more tax on personal wealth. Among the decimation of the Labour Party, it was sad to see Frank Field lose his seat. It shows the utter crisis in that party that someone so fair-minded and such a champion of pension reform should have felt he had to leave Labour and stand as an independent. As chairman of the Work and Pensions Committee, he was a fierce inquisitor, able to shred the nerves of some of the most powerful business leaders in the country. He was the scourge of Philip Green. Parliament will miss him, and I wish him well. The bounce in the markets would have been a tremendous day for Neil Woodford's Equity Income Fund. How ironic that as the FTSE 250 soared to a high, his former fund was telling investors about when they may get their money back. His protégé Invesco, Marks Barnett, meanwhile revelled in the rises, putting out an uncharacteristically chipper statement. At least he had the decency not to say, "I told you so." End of article. As one can see, these money professionals were indeed worried about a far-left Labour political victory, and were making plans for clients and themselves to move their monies abroad. Reading these articles also made us think whether the United States, if it were to, say, vote in a President Bernie Sanders or President Elizabeth Warren in 2020, could this lead to the same sort of reaction? The UK is far from being on the road to a major recovery, even though Boris Johnson has been elected. But sometimes, it's worth all of us bearing in mind that whilst pure naked capitalism may prove too ruthless for many, far-left socialism, bordering on communism, does not work either, and often leads to even more people ending up in a state of distress and poverty. As opposed to the life of milk and honey, their rather attractive incentive-type policies could lead some to believe they were heading towards. What do you think? Do share your thoughts. We hope you have found this video interesting and informative, and if so, please give it a thumbs up and share it on social media. Please ensure that you have subscribed to our channel and press the bell sign so that you are notified of any future videos. Also, kindly visit our website at illuminatisilver.com, and if you haven't already done so, please subscribe either as a free or paying member for regular email updates and offers. Disclaimer: Illuminati Silver owners come from a background of banking, international wealth management and economics. Having now retired from these worlds, we are not qualified to give investment advice. Therefore, this and other productions must not be deemed to be giving such advice and merely represent the personal views of its owners.